Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode 178. In this episode, Barry, Mike, and I discuss no-name hand planes, drawboring, scrub planes, and the best wood choice for a dining room table that's likely to travel the world. But first, we're going to try something a little bit different. Before we start the show, I want to bring everyone up to speed on what we're doing here at Fine Woodworking. A couple of weeks ago, we posted 2 videos of Danielle Rose Bird carving a greenwood shrink pot to go along with her article in issue 273. Concept of a shrink pot is hard to explain. It's equal parts woodworking, art, and magic. There's a free yet mesmerizing version of the video that is just Danielle carving, and one for members where she narrates the process throughout. I'll put a link to both videos in the show notes. Also, I wanted to remind everyone that Fine Woodworking Unlimited members have access to everything on the website. That's the archive going back to issue number 1. Everything's in there, even the old ads, which are fun to look at, and Taunton's complete illustrated guide to woodworking book series. If you've been thinking about an unlimited membership, but you're on the fence about it, there's a free 2-week trial available, so you could try it before you buy it. All right, let's get the show started. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer, send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. Any links or articles we mention will be on this episode's show notes page, which can be found at shoptalklive.com. On with the show. This episode is airing 4 days before Christmas.
Oh, great.
So I'm willing to bet there are some woodworkers out there who are throwing shellac on a project right now.
Oh, yeah.
I hope it's
hoping
shellac.
to get it done.
Why did I pick an oil finish?
How many, have you guys ever gone I know you're big on building presents.
Yeah, but it never works out. So if you're building something right now, Godspeed.
Yeah, you're screwed.
I think the first Christmas you were here, you knocked out like 5 or 6 things.
That was brutal. And I flew to Florida.
Yes.
So I had to get done. I didn't have like the December 25th deadline. It was December 19th or something.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, that's sooner than the 25th. So that was rough. But the first time I built something as a gift, it was a little dice box for some friends who were into tabletop gaming.
Oh.
And
Are they like Farkle dice?
No, they were the dodecahedrons.
How did
I
this
think.
get dorky or
like
20-sided.
Oh, for like Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm like, oil finish on oak, that's gorgeous. Except I hadn't accounted for the oak, like of the oil seeping out of the pores.
The old bleeding of the oak.
So after I wrapped it, I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to give this. And it was already late. And you saw these oil spots on the outside of the wrapping paper. Like, oh my God.
Like a McDonald's bag of fries.
Yes.
I think like a Five Guys bag of fries.
Yes.
What about you? Have you ever taken on the challenge of, I mean, there was
Yes.
one year Katie and I made every single present we gave.
That's cool.
It was awful. It was awful.
I did like a little 2-step, little step stools.
Mm-hmm.
That was for, I don't know, it must have been maybe a half a dozen of those.
Wow.
That was kind of cool. I was into ceramics for a while in college, and I had like a little electric kiln, so I would do little ornament-ish things, but being made out of ceramics are like really heavy, so it wasn't. Yeah. Yeah, I think for a long time I kind of tried to make the whole gaggle of holiday gifts. That's a cool thing.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of more cutting boards made in the month of December than all of the other months combined.
Well, that's the key, is that you gear up to make cutting boards to sell at holiday craft fairs, and you just make sure you don't sell them all. So by the time Christmas comes around,
or you miss the deadline.
yes,
and
then you've got like a couple dozen cutting boards laying around. And it's like bam, Christmas present, bam, bam, bam. So
I had to stop giving people spoons when my dad opened a spoon and he was like, "Oh, look, a spoon."
Oh, really? Because I'm still waiting on my spoon.
Everybody at work is still waiting on spoons because I stopped making them for a while, but the Shave Horse is in the living room. Spoon production has kicked back up for the winter season.
I just got a nice new shipment of dark roast oolong tea, and it's in my little tea canister at work, and I have to like stick my fat fingers into the little tea canister
Like an animal.
to put the little tea into my little teapot. And every time I think of that, I think I'm going to go down to the kitchen and get a plastic spoon just to shame Ben.
I asked him for a rice paddle because I just have that janky white one that comes with the steamer. It's like, Ben, and like failure pops into my head every time.
I forgot about that.
It's better or worse.
I thought you wanted a scoop. No, then you bought a scoop from Rusted Pulchitude, right?
Danielle Roseberg.
Oh, you bought a scoop from... Oh.
Wow.
La-ti-da.
Fancy.
The problem that I'm having with your... And that I need to confer with you about the teaspoon is how much of a crank you want on it. Because like the other night I made a spoon. I was like, this, maybe this is Mike's.
Maybe this is the one.
But like, I don't want you to have to, God forbid Mike has to bend his wrist. But like, it was like, no, there's not enough of a crank on it for that one specific task of putting tea.
Just keep making the spoons, and the right spoon will reveal itself to you. You'll say, this is it. And you'll hand it to me, and I'll say, this is it.
I'm going to show up with a ladle one day and just be like, this is it. All right, should we answer some questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right. First question is from Tony. We hear so much talk about Lee Nielsen Veritas and Stanley hand planes, but I have a Miller's Fall number 8 that I picked up from an antique store that works really well. I don't think I've ever heard the name Miller's Falls mentioned on the podcast, so I'm wondering if they are any good. Well, it works really well. They seem to have been in contention with Stanley, and they are American-made from New England, no less, since 1868. New England pride.
So I'm all on board with the Miller's Fall. When somebody says get an old Stanley, I hear get an old plane. It's not necessarily only Stanley.
This is true. There's a lot of plane manufacturers going on at that time because people were actually making a living with their hand planes.
Right. Yeah. So pre-World War II, you can expect better quality than...
I think so.
Yeah.
Your stable of planes is...
Eclectic.
It's pretty eclectic. That's a good... I was going to say a mutt.
So I have a Craftsman, and I got it for $15 or $25, so no money, really.
Of that same era?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I borrow $15?
And it's probably made by Miller's Falls. So there's this cool website hosted by Don Wildwall called Time Tested Tools. And he goes through and he has these different like stamps put on the plane. Like, oh, if it is this, it was made by Sargent. If it was this, it was made by Miller's Falls.
Oh, cool.
I know that. So mine is kind of like a Miller's Falls stamp, but regardless, it's a really nice plane.
Yeah.
It has never acted up on me. There's some backlash in the wheel adjustment, and the lateral adjustment isn't incredibly tight, but
yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, $15, $25, and it shaves really nicely.
Yeah.
So
that wasn't the plane you were using when you posted that picture of that, as you called, chunk out.
No, what was I using? I was using using an intermediate scrub plane, kind of a heavily cambered jack plane.
Yeah.
Wait.
I almost replied to you, I don't know why you got tear out. The grain is so straight and your shavings are so thin.
Wait, hold on. You saw that post?
Yes, I did.
Did you like it?
I'm sure I did.
No, you didn't. You ended
Yes,
like
I
one
did.
post and like 3 posts.
I liked it. I loved that post, actually. Yes.
That's like the fine woodworking office equivalent of spitting in his face.
No, okay. So that board is way over long, and there was a knot there. I'm like, I'm just gonna go through it. You know.
So, getting back to the question at hand.
So
You're not afraid of any manufacturers.
no, I mean, especially if it's pre.
But how
World
do
War
you
II.
know? How do you know? Are you that guy who like sits there on the phone looking up
No, so
serial numbers and stuff at the flea market?
No. For
Okay.
that plane, I mean, you can look at tote size. That plane I lucked out. To be totally honest, I lucked out. I did bring a ruler to the flea market, antique store where I bought it to check.
They must have loved that.
Yeah.
what are
They
you
mocked
doing?
me later. I became a regular. Like, what were you doing with that ruler? To check, like, to see if the blade was bellied on the back. And I did scope out the cap iron, but I lucked out. What to look for? I know the tote, like squattier front knobs are a sign of pre-World War II, but I'm not really up on my scoping out a plane
Yeah, I mean, I think it's whether it's a Stanley or any other brand, you're looking for pieces that aren't missing.
Okay.
A plane that isn't obviously been cannibalized and you see parts from a bunch of other planes. You want to make sure there's no cracks in the casting. And for an off-brand plane that may be difficult to get an aftermarket iron for it, take a look at the iron. It doesn't matter if it's all like ground and rounded over. Just look at the back of the iron and make sure it's not really pitted with rust, because if there's any pits, you can't get it sharp. But I think Hawk sells blades, I think, for different manufacturers of old hand planes. I'm not sure.
He might have. Jeff is saying he does.
But yeah, I mean, Miller's Falls, you mentioned Craftsman, Sargent, I think you mentioned that as well. There's a lot of them. I think you can just sort of kind of tell by looking at it whether it's an old plane or if it's if it's got plastic handles. Nah.
Have you seen the Miller's Falls, the Buck Rogers ones?
I've seen it.
The Roy Underhill.
I think
the outro of the Roy Underhill.
Yeah, and he really digs it. So that's my one exception to plastic handles. But
yeah.
I don't know if it was plastic or Bakelite. I'm not sure.
Ooh, Bakelite. Yeah, you're right. It's Bakelite.
Cool. But yeah, I mean, that, even if it doesn't work well, and I think Roy sort of confessed that it may not take the finest shaving of any hand plane he has, but I can understand how that would be your favorite hand plane. Absolutely.
I always, like, if I'm at a flea market, I'm always hesitant to, like, pull out straight edge and start checking it, because then they're going to be like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about, or I'm going to charge him more for it because he wants a good hand. It's like there's a fine line to ride between looking like you know too much and looking like, oh, I'm just buying a hand plane because I might paint it. I don't know. But there was one time that I was at the flea market and I was buying, because this is what I do, I buy wooden hand screws nonstop. And I didn't realize I was wearing a Lost Art Press shirt with it's my old school Lost Art Press shirt with the 3 hand planes on it. And I pick up a wooden hand screw and the guy goes like, $25. I was like, no. I was like, I'll give you 10. And he goes, you know what that is, and points to my shirt. And I was like, all right, I really have to own this right now. I go, yeah, I do.
Did you not blink when you stared him in the eyes?
I stared him right in the eyes and go, yeah, I do. And he goes, all right, 10. It was like, oh, okay, all right.
I do find, like, at flea markets, this whole notion of, oh, maybe somebody will have something that they don't know, the value of it. What I find is that if people are selling other stuff and they happen to have a hand plane there and they don't know the true value of it, it's always overpriced. They always think it's worth way more than it actually is. And I find that the tool dealers who have tons of stuff, that's actually where you get the best tools and the best deals from as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I got burnt out on rust hunting for that very reason. Because if there is something nice, it's just nasty and in the bottom of a bucket, and someone wants $100.
Yeah.
It's, not worth it.
All right. Question number 2 from Matt. I have been wanting to do a project using Drawbore mortise and tenon joints.
Yeah. What?
I like that. That was good enthusiasm. Right out the gate.
Is it a bad idea to attempt this joint in softer woods like cherry or walnut rather than oak?
I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I would say no.
Yeah.
I drawboard my kitchen table, and that's pine and some poplar, but pine, and that was
You have
fine.
a mutt of a kitchen table too.
Yeah, it's painted.
Yeah,
the base is painted.
Is there anything that you do differently in softer woods?
If anything, I think there's more wiggle room because I work in, obviously I work in white oak quite a bit. And in fact, I was just making a little shop stool and with the Drawbore joinery, and basically you're offsetting the holes in the mortise and the tenon, so as you drive them together, it actually pulls everything tight, which is really, really cool. It's a self-clamping joint. Where you run into trouble is if your offsets are too much. Mm-hmm. Things can break, the pin can sort of snap off. So I would say in softer woods, relatively speaking, cherry and walnut, you can probably, I think there's more leeway in terms of the amount of the variation in your offsets, and you can still get by because there's a little bit more compressive nature of those woods. Whereas I think the harder the wood, just like when you're fitting joinery, if it's really, really hard wood and there's no compression at all, you've got to be like dead on. So if anything, I don't think it's an issue. I'm going to say no.
I had nothing. My note was a larger offset, but it's probably not even a concern at furniture scale. It's like a skinny 64th, you know, it's like,
Right.
So,
Just see that little skinny crescent when you put them together. And that's good. You see like a half moon? No, that's bad.
Do you ever use, like, say you're doing, not even for aesthetic reasons, do you ever use oak pins on a walnut piece, or are you always using the species that's for the pin?
I think that's a really good idea in that even if it's, I think you need to be using a harder wood for pins. So I always typically use kind of a variation on ribbon oak, meaning I use kiln-dried stock. I'll find stuff with pretty straight grain. I'll take a short board, maybe 8 inches long, and just hit the end grain with my axe and split it so that's going straight with the grain, and then I'll just hand plane along that and then just bandsaw all my little pins off of that axis. So basically you want straight grain is really, really important. So yeah, I mean, if you want like a contrasting wood, like if you don't want to use oak on everything, I've used like rosewood pins on.
he has an axe. We haven't said anything about that yet, but he has an axe.
On a flame birch little table I made. I think I started off with, I don't know what I started off with, but I ended up using with the contrasting woods. It should be pretty tough, and it should be along the grain lines.
I pulled up Lotta's drawboring article that he did, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
And that was the only tip regarding species, was if I'm using a really soft wood like pine, I'm going to grab a maple peg. And I think there was just so there wasn't so much color contrast, but he said he's definitely going harder. So,
Chris Gochner in the infield cupboard it was a cherry cupboard and used cherry drawbar pins. But when he would do the dry fitting and everything, and he would drawbore it with cherry, he would take those pins out and throw them away.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It was like single use.
Yeah.
You know, it's not even worth trying to reuse them.
Yeah.
Just make new pins.
The other cool thing about that style of joinery is, as I mentioned, I was making my shop stool, and I was sort of kind of refining the design as I was building. And what's really cool is with the drawbore joinery, you can just tack them in place, just get them started to pull the joint tight, and you can do all your dry fitting. Like I had to dry fit the base in order to measure for a stretcher between the lower rails and that kind of stuff. You know, you just tack it together and it holds really, really tight, but then you just pop them back out and you can pull it back apart. So
you don't even bother with drawbore pins. Those like big taper metal thingies. The face you're making is saying no.
Oh, that tool that allows you to align.
It looks like what you use to like sharpen a kitchen knife, like one of those. Yeah,
I know. That was probably that was a very important learning experience for me. I was demonstrating a Lee Nielsen show in Mystic Seaport, which was really cool, which is neither here nor there. But someone came up and he was holding this Lee Nielsen little pointy stick for aligning drawbore holes. He says, "Oh, do I need this?" I said, "No." And he was like so crushed and so depressed. It's like, he just wanted someone to say, yeah, you need that.
It's a cool looking tool.
So I learned that lesson. So of course you need one of those, Barry.
When you made your stool, there's bridle joints that you draw boring.
Yeah.
Are you offsetting those holes? So basically that bridle joint, you want it to pull tight in two directions.
Yeah.
Are you offsetting those holes in both directions? Diagonally?
If you reference my little sewing table article with the bridle joint at the top, I did speak specifically about offsetting at an angle. So I'm a little steamed at this point in time.
I think he was trying to lead you on. He was baiting
trying to give the listener more information.
Here's the thing, though. It's every time I do it, I have to figure it out because I know, okay, just going straight into like a regular tenon. I know if I, mark a little center point, dry fit the joint, mark the center point, pull it apart, I make a new center point just a hair in toward the shoulder. And that's good. So I'm thinking, okay, so I'm pulling this bridle joint at a diagonal. So I'm going to go a hair into the shoulder and then a hair down. And it's like, no, that pulls it to the shoulder, but then up away from the bottom of the bridle joint. Because I did it once and you pound it through and it kind of, there was a little gap.
Oh, yeah, I just did that in my head.
Yeah, and I said, oh, that was weird, but maybe I just got it wrong. So then I did the second one and boop, it came up too. It's like, what is going on? So it's a little counterintuitive, but going into the shoulder of the tenon, you go toward the shoulder, but the bridle, you go up away from the bridle. So I have to like refigure out every time. And the last time I tried it, I guessed wrong. So now I don't care and I just go straight into the joint.
Do you ever did you have to remake that piece? Maybe.
Yeah, I did. So I pulled it back out. I drilled out that whole oversize. I plugged it, and then I fit it back in and remarked it. So, yeah, that was a bummer.
How is it pounded out of draw? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I was drinking. You pounded out the peg?
Yeah.
Or drilled? Okay. What is that like?
Usually it's not too bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's something that I just am terrified.
Because I typically don't glue the pins, and I'll glue like the mortise and tenon of a joint, but I don't put glue on the pin or in the little hole of the pin because it just holds itself.
Got it. Yeah.
Well, you've already admitted to one smooth move. Do you want to give us this week's smooth move?
Gosh, that was probably it. Here's kind of a smooth move, and it's something I'm in the middle of right now, is I tend to build a lot of furniture, which...
and I have no place to put it anymore.
And I have so much I have no place to put it. I actually don't do a lot of commission work. Most of the work I do, it's either for articles or for teaching, and it all sort of kind of falls into one big kind of melding pot of furniture-ish making that all looks like the stuff that I make. So I got a recent commission, though, and it's someone, they needed a little table, and I said, well, what style, what wood? It's like, oh, I really like your stuff. Just, kind of do your thing. It's like, that's like the ultimate commission, right? That's something I've been working for my entire woodworking life is I love what you do. Just make me something. It's like, and it was like, I froze. It's like, oh, no. And I had to think, it's like, oh, it's a commission. Someone's paying for it. I have to make a real piece of furniture now. What would that be? Oh, Hank Gilpin, what would he do? Because he makes real furniture. And Tim Coleman, what would Tim do? Because that's real furniture. And I was sort of picturing this table in my mind, and like every time I sort of looked at the upper part of the table where the aprons meet the legs meets the top, which is really defines the whole piece, it was this fuzzy black cloud in my brain. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what was there. And every time I thought of a solution that was more typical of what I would have done in the past, I said, no, you can't do that because that's what you do, and that's what you've done. And, of course, it took, about 3 days to say, Mike, you're being really stupid. It's like everything you make is so based on everything you've made. Why move away from that? Because you can't do anything else. So just hang on. So I kind of went back, kind of started, with the last piece that I made, which was a T-chest on a stand, and I looked at the stand, and even that was like a couple steps removed from what I normally do, but, because that was based on a little T-table, which was based on this Krenov-style stand, which was based on the rolling rack for my tool case, so this evolution of form. So I looked at that and sort of came up with an idea. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. It's kind of based on that, but then it's moving forward and adding some curves and lightening up some elements to give it more of a refined look and changing the wood. And so, the smooth move was just completely abandoning any sense of just build what you want to build. And don't get too far in your head and thinking you need to make something real. So I think that's it.
There was a moment in there that was like, I'll never say that because such and such was based on the rolling rack of my tool case. And but that's, even though it's shop furniture,
yes,
you used it as an opportunity to try something new, blah, 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 and it led to another piece.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it was like, oh, yeah, see, if you just screw together plywood with drywall screws. It doesn't work that way.
I was looking at the base of his tool rack or the tool chest one time. I'm like, oh, he used 2x4s. I'm like, oh, but he designed them. Come on now.
So, yeah. But I think that is true, is that, not every piece you're going to make is going to be perfect. But the more you invest, the more you try on any given piece. Like you said, if you make something out of screws and plywood, the lesser you might learn is, well, the next piece I'm going to make is not going to be screws and plywood. So that's that lesson. But whatever effort you invest, I think the more you can gain from that piece that you make. So if you make something really mindlessly, you may not be moving forward, but just try even on a small thing, and it's going to maybe teach you a new skill, give you a new perspective, give you a new design detail or construction detail or a joint you've never tried before, and then that just becomes part of your arsenal that you can put towards the next things that you make.
Cool.
Me?
Yeah.
So talking about making a project and not necessarily moving forward, this whole project was a smooth move. So context, we're moving shops, the magazine's between shops. So that push towards the end was like, you got to build some stuff, use up the good wood, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
And so I was just knocking out these little boxes. One was a gift and the other one was just me. Like I had a nice piece of wood. I'm going to build a box that whatever dimensions I can get out of this thing.
Right.
It's mitered, and the first thing I screwed up was that you do that instant rabbited lid where you cut a groove on the inside, and then when you saw the opposing halfway up kerf on the outside, the lid pops off, you get a nice little rabbit.
Yeah.
I screwed that up somehow. I'm still not totally sure. So I sawed off that rabbit. And I'm like, oh, I'll just put in a mitered liner.
Yeah.
And there's only plywood hanging around, so cool, I'll paint it. It'll be a nice little accent piece.
Milk paint.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was milk paint, green milk paint. And so I cut the plywood, miter it. It's a good, nice fit, except I cut the plywood too narrow. It wasn't wide enough for it to register on the lid. All right, fine. I'll cut this mitered liner again. I keep the first plywood liner on hand to help me set up the stops because it,
the length is good, right?
The length is good. And so I make the new liner. It's nice and wide. It grabs onto the lid. Cool. So I go home. I come back the next day. Oh, no, and then I sand the mitered liner. Go home. Come back the next day. This liner is a lot rougher feeling than I remember when I sanded up to 220 yesterday. So I sand the liner. I'm this is weird. I know I did this. Maybe it was just in a daze. Put glue on, clamp it up. I'm all right, sweet. Oh, no, painted, glued, clamped it up. I'm all right, sweet. Go to put the lid on that moment of success.
Yeah.
I glued in the narrow liner. And it wasn't grabbing because of that rabbit that didn't work from the first thing I smooth moved. So then I had to trim down the lid. And it's fine now. It holds business cards and such, but
But you have to trim the top of the business cards off a 16th of an inch.
I had it in my cube. Ben's like, oh, nice box. I'm like, don't talk to me about that box.
I liked it. Yeah, and you had the opportunity, you had the moment of I thought I did this already.
Yeah.
And that was where you should have caught yourself, but nope.
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you what I did with the narrow liner. I thought I just put them in a corner. But no, you get rid of the things that don't work. You put a big red X.
DNU. Yeah, do not use. Well, mine is embarrassing and somewhat dangerous. And this, like Barry said, in the last few weeks before we knew that we were going to lose the shop, it was all hands on deck. You got to build stuff because it's going to be a little while before we have another one. And we should have made a list of all of the things we said we were going to build in that time period because it was 4 or 5 workbenches and side tables,
Yeah.
It was oh yeah, we need to knock out some workbenches right now. Didn't happen. But so one of the problems with the communal shop is that you don't want to invest a whole lot of time into jigs and sleds and fixtures.
Right.
Because someone else is going to use them, ruin them, whatever.
Right.
So I needed to do splines on some boxes, and I thought, well, what if I just took a 2x4, took it to the chop saw, cut it at a 45, glued it back onto itself, and I had a tall 45-degree ramp, if you will.
Okay. Yeah.
That I can then use to hold the box as you rip a spline through it.
Okay.
In theory, it worked until there was nothing to hold the box from tipping forward.
Okay.
And as I was lining a box up to get ready for a cut, and I'm not like in my, I'm making a cut mindset,
Right.
which is, amped up focus and everything. As I'm just like moving things around.
And the blade is on at this point?
And the blade is spinning because I'm in between cuts.
Oh, okay.
That box, and it was my prototype, thankfully, tipped into the blade.
Ooh. Bam.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it was, there's just a kerf into the side of my prototype box. I was doing one to make sure everything worked and, to learn the process on. But it really was one of those, like, it was totally, like, nothing kicked back, nothing. It just went into the blade and sat there. And it was like, you are an idiot. You are absolutely stupid. Turn off the saw, go outside, walk around and think about how dumb you are.
I want you to think about this.
Yeah. But, it was
Wow.
that was not this by anywhere near the smartest thing I've ever done. But it's that, I don't want to spend too much time on this mentality that leads you into a stupid thing that could have really done more damage than I got lucky on that one.
Good.
Only tipping the box into the blade.
All right. Well, that's the best kind of lesson.
Yeah.
One that scares the bejesus out of you, but doesn't cause any lasting damage.
I wound up just gluing a kerf into the, gluing a piece of wood into that kerf. And, my son will store Matchbox cars in it or something like that. And it'll taunt me for years to come.
Sure.
But, all right, we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Barry's going to tell us about his fine scrub plane and heavy scrub plane because you have an intermediate scrub plane.
Yeah, I don't understand your tone.
Recently, I brought my wife Katie into the studio to ask her advice on giving gifts to woodworkers. What should a loved one think about when buying a holiday gift for a woodworker?
Will they use it? Do they have it? It really helps to reach out to other woodworkers on Instagram and ask them for advice.
Is that what you do?
Maybe.
But what would you get someone who might have a lot of tools?
Oh, definitely a fine woodworking membership.
Wow, you're really good at this.
Yeah, lots of information.
I didn't even tell you to say that.
No.
Well done.
Especially the online membership. Really good videos.
Well, you know what is awesome now? We have an unlimited membership, which is the subscription and the online membership and access to the archive and complete illustrated guide to woodworking.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't take up a lot of space if you're looking to declutter your house.
So if you're in a bind, there's still time to give the gift of the Fine Woodworking Unlimited membership to your favorite woodworker. Head on over to finewoodworking.com/giftunlimited.
The gift of love.
All right, question 3. Barry has his prop out. Can someone explain the difference between a scrub plane and a smooth plane? They seem similar in size and construction. And they are. I looked. Lie-Nielsen number 4 is 10.25 inches long, and a Lie-Nielsen scrub plane is 9.5 inches long.
It's narrower.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Big open throat.
Yeah, huge. So, this throat, I can fit one of my fingers into, my pinky finger. So I have a scrub plane for those listening at home. And
This isn't your normal everyday scrub plane. This is probably...
this is one of the Avengers.
This was owned... it's a German-style scrub plane, right?
Yeah, so it's a German style, or I think continental type plane, but it's wooden body with a horn at the front.
At the front? I've never seen that at the front.
It's not. So what I like about this is because you're really going. So a scrub plane has a heavily cambered iron and a wide open throat, and that's so you can just eat up boards to thickness them by hand or to apply texture. But traditionally, thickness them by hand going across the grain.
Okay.
And so this horn at the front of mine I really like because you can just grab it and go, and it fits the back of my hand nicely.
So, yeah. So,
I should glue that in.
Yeah. The horn is also loose, but
And the iron's fairly narrow.
So my iron is, I just measured it. It's just shy of 1.5 inches wide. Ditto the Lee Nielsen. I think it's 1.45.
Whereas a regular number 4 smoother is about 2 inches.
Yeah. Iron's pretty thick. So, and I didn't measure mine. The Lee Nielsen one is like 1.85 inches thick. I think I wrote it down.
Okay.
As opposed to their normal number 5 or number 4, sorry, which is what is it? Sorry, their iron's 3/16 of an inch thick on the scrub plane.
Yeah.
Which is 0.06 thicker than their number 4, and they have pretty beefy irons.
Yeah.
Does the scrub plane not have a chip breaker? On the Lee
Theirs
Nielsen?
doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Mine also doesn't. And you can get, so if you just take like an old, like a rusty number 4 that you get for $10 at a flea market.
Yeah.
File open the mouth.
so when you buy the Craftsman and it turns out to be the junk Craftsman,
Yeah.
you turn it into a scrub plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just whatever cheap plane you have lying around, just file open the mouth if it's metal or wood. Put a heavily cambered iron on. And for the chip breaker, you want it way out of the way.
Okay.
So bring it back to the bottom of the curve.
Okay.
So, but how do you recommend honing
Cambered
smoothing
iron.
plane iron? Yeah.
Buy 8-inch joiner instead. By hand.
A smoothing plane iron? Like how do you address that camber?
Well, I mean, a smoothing plane iron, the camber you're talking is like in the thousandths of an inch radius. So you can't see it. You can't physically make it. The way you do it is just pressure right and left on each corner of the blade as you're sharpening, as you're honing it.
And you do it on your 4,000 grit, right?
Yeah, 4,000, which would be the intermediate stone that I use. But for cambered iron, like a curved iron, I have a couple planes, Krenov style planes that I made, and I got the irons from Ron Hawk, where you can buy cambered irons of different radiuses. And those I just sharpen by hand because they're really, really thick irons. So there's a nice hollow grind that makes it a little bit easier to kind of register on the stone as you're working that whole curve. So I think that the toughest thing about a cambered iron is getting that initial grind on there in a really controlled and accurate fashion. Because if you have a nice heavy grind and it's even, it's pretty easy to hone that by hand.
I was surprised. I was worried about honing this by hand. And that hollow grind and even curvature across it. Because I made this. This was an old smoothing plane.
How'd you grind that? Because your grind is really nice.
Yeah.
I did. I marked it. I think it's about a 2.5 inch radius.
Okay.
So I just put a paper template on, did a marker line.
Yeah.
And I don't think I flattened it square.
Did you grind? I was going to ask if you ground it at 90 degrees to your curve and then use that to create your bevel.
I don't think I did. I think I just went slowly, ate away at it, which I wouldn't do again because that took a while.
Yeah.
And since then, I've ground irons flat and then redone the profile, and I like that more. It seems to go faster, more controlled.
All right.
That was just slow and steady.
So, for honing on this, you're almost doing it more like you would an axe than a plane iron. Because you can't put this directly on the stone.
Oh, yeah.
I turn my stone
How do you-
sideways.
Like this. So this is your stone. So you're here and you're just kind of working just like that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it's a twisting motion.
Yeah.
With your wrist. Okay.
That's what I've been doing. I've been doing full sweeps.
Or the full suite. That's
you
very
have-
elegant.
You have.
I have an 11-inch long stone, though.
You're skating across that thing.
But yeah, this is the smoothing plane is for nice, smooth, glassy, finished cuts.
Yes.
This is going to be ugly, you know?
And it's the intent isn't a finished surface. It's to really hog off stock in a really aggressive manner.
Yeah.
So.
And almost never will I go with the grain with this because any, wiggle, this thing wants to dive right in and take a big old chunk out.
Okay.
So
Like you showed us on Instagram.
That was
your
at the intermediate, yeah.
scrub. Do you really have more than one scrub plane?
I would consider it a Hardy Jack, the other one.
Some people do camber the iron on their jack planes pretty heavily. So you're right, that is halfway in between.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the last scrub plane question we'll get for years to come. Thank you,
Wait,
Barry.
one more thing.
Oh,
Sorry.
no.
Because you mentioned the camber on the smoothing plane is in the thousandths of an inch. You can't see it.
Right.
This, on my scrub plane, over the 1/4 inch wide blade, it's a 1/16 of an inch difference. Like, that's the drop from center to corner on each side.
Okay.
So,
And the concept's the same in that you want to take an almost full width shaving, just stopping at the edges so you're not digging the corners of the blade in. And for a scrub plane, you're just taking, it's designed to take really, really heavy shavings. And a smooth plane is designed to take really thin shavings.
Yeah.
But they are similar in size.
yeah, and this, I mean, you don't want it long. You don't want to have more mass pushing around. It doesn't do you much good because you're not like trying to get a flat surface. You're just getting toward.
So
It's sort of moderately controlled gouging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
you wouldn't, if you were going to go to flea market and just buy an old plane, you would use a number 4, not a number 5 for
I'd say 3
Converting.
or 4.
yeah.
3 or 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you don't want it also like a smoothing plane. You want to be able to follow any minor deviations in the surface as
Yeah.
opposed to like a jointer plane. Ditto here. I don't want to get caught up, have the plane resting on 2 flats like I want it to go.
And you're also going cross grain. So
Yeah,
across
and
the width of a board, which is
Yeah, and I want to be able to take like control cuts like, oh, here's a high spot. I'm just going to go there. And I don't
Right.
want to have to worry about.
Yeah, I never flatten stock by hand, but I think in terms of the sequence of hand planes, isn't it scrub to number 5 to number 7 to get it really, really flat, and then back to your smoothing plane number 4, where you're no longer worried about flattening. All you're doing is just smoothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
or if you're Mike, jointer, planer, number 4.
It is a nicer process. jointer plane.
All right, question number 4. It's a long one. From Philip. I am looking to build a dining room table for a friend of mine, and I am wondering what type of wood would be best to use. The friend that I am making this for is a military man, and so gets stationed at different bases around the country every few years. My main concern is the table warping or splitting due to the drastic location and environmental changes that he will come across. Obviously, a dining room table must be sturdy and not too prone to scratches, dings, etc. White oak is very wear resistant, but has a medium-high shrinkage value. Cherry is pretty stable once dried, but is softer and may get more dings. Walnut seems to be the middle road, being harder and less susceptible to scratches than cherry, but less likely to shrink warp than white oak. What type of wood would you suggest is going to be resistant to scratches and dings, yet won't warp or split due to drastic climate changes?
I don't think there's a relative difference between any of those woods.
Yeah.
You're all good. None of them I would worry too much in regard to, dings and scratches. It's all kind of the same to a certain extent in terms of expansion, contraction, stability. You're going to be good. You know, if the base of your table is keeping everything nice and flat, you have nice glue joints between the boards, it's just not going to be an issue. I don't think I would worry about it.
Yeah, in this set of 3 woods, cherry is technically the softest, but that's still a pretty durable wood. I mean, my cherry dining room table with, I believe my son was 3 at the time, up to 5, if that's not getting scratched and dinged up, nothing is.
I think all 3 woods are very appropriate and traditionally used in that. So it really comes down to, but each of those woods has a drastically unique character to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you can have one design. Okay, here's my table. What wood do I make it out of? Because that wood is really going to affect probably what you design and what it looks like.
Yeah.
So I would work with what you want the table to look like with the wood in mind so that the wood matches the design of the piece.
Yeah, that was my note. It was design arrow 2 wood choice because I didn't see a huge difference, especially if you're really concerned, get quarter sawn stock or, then get into stock selection or
But that also plays into design too, because if you've got quarter sawn oak The design
that's
is
fair.
going to change from flats on oak or whatever.
I mean, if you use like big, thick, live edge slab walnut or something, those boards by their nature, they tend to move a lot. And because they tend to be relatively thick, the energy in that board when it wants to move, it's just going to move. But at the same time, there's sort of a rustic quality to a live edge board tabletop to where, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, I think wood selection is less of a concern than construction method. Because, so this table is going to be moving across country multiple times throughout its life. I don't think I would do a trestle table without a breadboard end. I think I would do a table with aprons so that those aprons are attached to that tabletop during the moving process. I think about my dining room table, trestle table. If I'm moving it, I'm taking the flat top off of the stretchers, and there's nothing now holding it in place. If he's moving cross country, that could be a month, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
A lot of time for that to all of a sudden hit a climate change and potato chip.
I think for a base like a trestle base where it isn't doing a lot to keep things flat, I don't think breadboard ends do anything other than hide the end grain.
Okay.
I think cleats on the underside of the table that are mounted sort of, in the opposite direction vertically, that does a lot to sort of keep things fairly flat. But, I mean, if you think of the typical heating and cooling seasons in Connecticut, where you go from, in a house with really bad AC or no AC, you're talking 80% humidity, 90% humidity in the summer. With a wood stove and not a lot of insulation, you're talking like 0% humidity. So, I mean, even in a typical heating and cooling climate, where you have real summers and winters, that thing's moving a lot anyway. You're, in essence, building for a trip across the country wherever you're going to.
Yeah, but a trip across the country unassembled, to me, is different than a trip across the country assembled. Because, like, my dining room table is flat because of the trestle base.
So if you have, like, aprons and four legs, turn the whole table upside down, pile all the stuff on top of the underside of the table, and just carry it out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I wouldn't do, like moving parts. Like, I don't know if I would have leaves that you could take out or put in.
I think you're right. Your drop leaf.
Right.
Because of that.
Because, the more moving parts, the more things can move on their own.
Yeah.
And that's something I do think I would avoid in terms as far as construction goes.
That's a really good point.
Have you ever done a table with drop leaves or anything?
Yeah.
Did you do the drop leaves cross grain?
Along the grain. I had like a shaker table I wanted to use up against a wall as just sort of a shallower desk. So I actually had an asymmetric table. So when it was down, the tabletop was narrow and centered over the trestles. And then the back or the portion against the wall, when you pull it out, you could lift up that leaf and lock it, and it became a wider table. But then it looked really stupid because it was like off center at the base. So I eventually remounted the tabletop on the base so that the leaf could no longer drop down. And that was my dining table for 10 years. So
I should have asked. I said drop leaf. I should have asked with a center leaf to.
I did make one not where the table itself split into halves, but just where there were rails that you could pull out on either end and drop down like an 18-inch wide leaf or 16-inch wide leaf on that end.
Okay.
And to make it bigger. But I am like morally and philosophically opposed to tables that expand and contract now.
Okay. So add that to the list of coffee tables. You're morally opposed to coffee tables.
Yeah, not morally opposed. I think they're all ugly. But I mean, the thing is, like, it's like when you build your first crosscut sled. What's the biggest piece of wood I'm ever going to cut on here? I better size my sled. And
48 inches wide.
Yeah. It's the same thing with a dining table. Well, that one time Thanksgiving 5 years ago, we had 18 people here. I need to build a dining table for 18 people. It's like, no, build it for the other 364 days of the year.
Yeah.
And just get out the folding table and stick it on the end of your table and put a tablecloth across everything and it looks like a big table and then put your folding table away. So, I don't know.
I got nothing. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think it's time to read some listener comments. This one is on YouTube on Shop Talk Live 176, and I liked it. It's from Josh Thomas. I imagine a non-woodworker watching this and wanting to smash their head through a computer screen.
What does being a non-woodworker have to do with it?
Oh, I think people have written in talking about their spouses listening with them and everything. Actually, my wife listens. It's like, why? Stop. All right. And then I've really hesitated about reading this one or not.
I love it. It's my next tattoo.
This one was on it was on a video on the website, but and in the video I'm cleaning up a rusty tool in my shop, and I say I've been working on the shop for 2 years and it still wasn't wired, and right now it is, dude. Let's see, 2 years in the house and you still have not run a circuit out to the shop. What's the big deal? Dig a trench, set the conduit, pull the Romex into the conduit, then hook it up. I would think that not having a working home shop would be a requirement to working. I'm sorry. I would think that having a working home shop would be a requirement to working at Fine Woodworking. Dozens, if not 100 or more, would like to have that job who have a working home shop and use it daily.
What I love about that is in like the first three quarters, you're like, oh, this is just a really fun troll. Like someone is with you and then it just takes a left turn into dark.
And the part that I didn't put is it started with not to be a Debbie Downer. And it turned into, you shouldn't have your job. Give it to someone else.
I love it.
This is the kind of response we're looking for. This is what makes the show.
Readers.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is what lets us rant for the whole rest of the 2 weeks before the next podcast. That's awesome.
I read that like every morning I come in, I read website comments, I respond as I can. And, I read every comment on the website, and I read that and it just set the tone of my day. And like every hour I would just like click on it and like start to reply. And they're like, no. And then I decided, let's reply on the podcast where he probably won't hear
Well,
it.
I love the spirit of this, so I don't want to argue any about tone or negativity because that's all cool. However, I do want to argue with the notion that any fine woodworking editor should have like this glorious outfitted home shop.
Come on now.
Because it's not the reality for the majority of our readers. I mean, a lot of people are like you. I've got a space, but I still need to do this and this, so I'm getting by with this. That's a reality. And if we're all sitting here in these perfectly conditioned, well-lit, well-electronically outfitted shops, it's kind of hard to relate to someone who doesn't have that. So, and Barry, you're in a position where you came here, you relocated, you don't have a shop. And that's really important too. I mean, the notion that not everyone that comes to the magazine comes as an expert, and that's a really, really good thing. What's really important is that you come with a certain passion. And that with that passion, there's a curiosity, there's wanting to get better. And then that informs the articles we make because, Barry, you'll go to an author and watch the way that maybe they're doing something that's new to you, but a more experienced editor may have seen that done 20 times as sort of yawning their way through it. And you're like, why do you do it that way? What is that about? And all of a sudden you're getting answers and information out of that author, which is going to benefit a huge portion of our readers that wouldn't be there had someone with more experience been there and not asked those questions. And conversely, it's nice to have people on the staff like John Benson, who is the reigning expert and authority on contemporary furniture design and knows every maker out there. That's a huge and tremendous resource for the magazine. So it's a big mix. And some of us have nice shops. Some of us are on our way. Some of us are dependent on the fine woodworking shop and are now incredibly frustrated to not have a shop to work with.
I have a spare bedroom and a workbench.
See, so
And a myriad of scrub planes.
So it's all good. So it's not. I'm not taking anything you say to task. It just is a good opportunity to talk about what I think makes the staff of the magazine really, really healthy and viable, and actually creates a really good product. So there you go.
Bam. Dude, you got told.
Well, is now the right time to bring up the article idea about the versatility of 2 scrub planes? Is that like...
As long as Garrett Hack writes it. All right. Let's see. On iTunes, we had a couple of 5-star comments.
Read the name.
I know. I was going to. This one is by General Sweet Pants. If I had waited half a second longer, he would have spit his tea out. Woodworking meets nerdy humor. I don't know what you're talking about there. We were just talking about 20-sided dice. Let's see. This has to be the best woodworking podcast out there. The hosts are a wealth of knowledge. Their personalities all complement each other so well, and there appears to be some real camaraderie between all of the fine woodworking staff. Keep up the great work.
There doesn't appear to be.
It appears to be.
And then the next one is from Te Homaga, and this is based on a meme, but I can't figure out. So
I looked it up.
I'm looking for guidance. Title of the review is Pepperidge Farm Planes, and he says, "My favorite place to listen to the Pepperidge Farm guy talk about the price of Stanley planes."
I don't know what that means. and I'm full on a millennial. So if someone could email in with this translation, I'd be really grateful.
There was the meme of I feel like it was from Family Guy or something like that about, do you remember when Pepperidge Farm or whatever? I remember when it's an old man reminiscing about the days of old and somehow tied to Pepperidge Farm.
Yeah.
So fill us in, please.
Back in the day, a scrub plane cost a nickel.
All right, All right,
I'm itching to drop a Simpsons joke, but I don't think anybody watches it, and I'm have such an internal struggle with this. I'm going to tie an onion to my belt, which was a style at the time. But see, it lands flat, but I had to get it out.
I don't think you need to be up on Simpsons to find that humorous.
All right, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I know the quote.
Whoa. Okay.
Yes, I'm not alone.
Jeff's your audience right now. That's a little frightening.
Give me 5 B's for a quarter, you'd say.
And Barry's just getting warmed up.
I know. I've kept the Simpsons quotes deep inside for the past year and a half. They're kind of flowing out. I'm sorry.
All right. Barry recommends The Simpsons.
And shop shoes, to be honest.
Shop Shoe Sunday. Hashtag.
Yeah. I've started working in that spare bedroom in my apartment. And I'm traipsing sawdust and wood shavings all over the place.
What's the shop shoe of choice?
What I really loved, I had an old pair of Chucks that I cut the back out of so I could slip them in. What? But I also had to stitch the tongue to the grommets or whatever.
So there's no ties.
Oh my God.
No, there are ties, but they were just stayed tied.
We're learning so much about you.
But I had this pair of Chucks that had a hole almost worn in the bottom. So I cut out the back, clogs or mules.
Sure.
What are they called?
Yeah. Mary Jane's.
Yeah. Because you can just slip them in and off. And so you get to the shop door, slip out, come back, slip in. And there's no...
You're changing your shoes walking from room to room.
I'm barefoot 100% of the time. You've seen my toe shoes. Being barefoot is the way to go. But when I get to the shop, I need a pair of shoes.
The spare bedroom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, but don't you have to walk through your shop to go to the bathroom?
Mm-hmm.
What's that like?
Shop shoes. Shop shoes off. Bathroom. Shop shoes on. Shop shoes off.
I think shower, shop shoes.
Anyway, I recommend shop shoes. So you're not traipsing stuff through the house. I'm pretty sure traipsing stuff through the house cost me a relationship in the past.
Pretty sure it was something else.
Had them pretty good catch, Ben. So that's my recommendation. And don't hang out with Ben.
You have shop shoes.
I do. I recently upgraded my shop shoes from fuzzy Crocs, which I've had for years, to sort of felted wool slip-on-ish clogs with a real rubber tread sole to them. So they're indoor-outdoor slippers. They're fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm using now because I left my other shoes in my other shop. But yeah.
All about comfort.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I have no shop shoes.
Do you have a recommendation, though?
I do have a recommendation. And
That just means you're always wearing your shop shoes.
always ready to go.
Yep, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. My recommendation is Chris Thiele's "Thank You, New York" from the record. Thank you for listening.
It's
Check
tremendous.
it out. It's Barry and I just can't stop talking about it.
I'm going to have to say Tom Waits' Swordfish Trombones, which I just downloaded because I got Apple Music, so I'm now just like getting all the old stuff. And,
Swimming in it.
so that's my shop listening tunes of late.
Nice.
All right. Well, that is all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have questions you'd like us to answer on the show, send them in to shoptalk@taunton.com. If you're watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up button. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.
I realized when I made that Simpsons reference to you, I'm looking almost right in the camera.
I am the camera.
Gonna tie an onion to my belt, which was a style at the time.